So I want to talk to you about a lot of issues involving law enforcement, but I want to start with this Law Enforcement Training Advisory Board. It's a bill being considered, and it does some kind of interesting things. So tell us the idea. We talk a lot about, training for police officers, but this is something that you think is important to add in Connecticut that's happening elsewhere, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So when I became a detective in 2015, I had an opportunity where I work is on the Rhode Island border. What Rhode Island has done for years is they train their police officers, their next coming up detectives, so to speak, at what they call the BCI school at the University of Rhode Island. It's every Friday. It's about 7 hours every Friday for 2 semesters, and you learn all aspects of crime scene processing, photography, fingerprints, latent DNA, tire tracks, all of the issues that you would deal with on scene. In Connecticut, we have a state-of-the-art lab in Meriden to process this evidence, forensic evidence, scientific evidence, but we've really failed in the last few years of training our police officers on scene to get that good evidence there. So what's happened in 2021, we had sort of a mass exodus of a lot of experience in our state, and that has resulted in a lower clearance rate of crimes in the state of Connecticut. So while that is a great class, and I remember going through it back in 2015 thinking, I wish we had this in Connecticut, because a lot of things are state specific, and we're paying money for people to go out of state, and we're sending that money out of state. So to create that situation here in Connecticut, and Central Connecticut State University is already in an MOU with the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection for a detective training certificate program, and this enhances that significantly to have the training from the scientists at the lab for the on-scene officers to get the best evidence to them so we can solve more crimes and prevent the wrongful incarceration of people because we have the right training people on the scene. Connecticut law enforcement historically has been the highest trained police officers in the country, and while I still think that's true, a lot of the in-service training that used to happen at post has sort of shifted a little bit more towards a certificate oversight, and that in-service training has dwindled a bit, so we're trying to rejuvenate that through our colleges and universities.
With a lot of this stuff, and I know there's other parts of the bill I want to talk about, but with a lot of this evidence collection kind of stuff, you get one shot.
That's correct.
So it can't be that the first guy there didn't know what he was doing, because that's the kind of thing that an entire prosecution could be gone. So it's important to have that knowledge, right?
Right. It's important that you get that one shot at that piece of evidence and then one shot at the scene to recognize what evidence is there and what evidence is not there to really get to the best solution for sure. We've incorporated Southern Connecticut where they've been working on a SWLE, social work for law enforcement. When the Police Accountability Bill passed in 2020, there was a lot of emphasis on marriage of social workers and policing, and there's been a lot of misinformation about that. The model basically works like this. For years, police officers, by nature of their 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week operation, get called to a lot of mental health issues when people are in crisis in those moments. But then they end up at the hospital, they get evaluated, and they're right back out, and there's no ongoing checking in, et cetera. Police officers and police departments have collaborated with social workers all around the state in this model where after that crisis moment, the social worker with a police officer continues to visit that individual to make sure they have the resources that are available to them, and they're really getting to the underlying cause, which makes that individual's life much better. It limits the amount of calls that police officers are going to, and it limits those interactions between police officers and folks with mental health that have some unfortunate and tragic ends sometimes. It's nobody's fault, it's the dynamic of it, but if we can avoid that, that's what we do. So I've partnered with one of my colleagues who has a completely different ideologue than me, State Rep Jillian Gilchrist, and we've worked together on this bill. I'm a police officer by trade, as you mentioned. Her background is in social work, and we've come together on these two bills, these two concepts into one bill, and we're working on getting it through the legislature now. And I'll say this, in the Judiciary Committee where I also serve, we spend a lot of money as a state on settlements for wrongful incarceration. If this particular piece of legislation and that training can avoid at least one of those, it pays for itself already.